Because we don't know how they called themselves.
Exactly.
Yes, there were no Indo-European texts from early Bronze Age, right? So we should name them somehow.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Language Therapy with Dr. K. My guest today is someone very dear to me, someone whose work has really inspired and influenced my own framing and understanding of Armenian, and that is none other than Dr. Hrach Martirosyan, a world-renowned linguist who works on Armenian in its Indo-European context. Dr. Martirosyan also happens to be our inaugural scholar in residence for our Seminole Scholars Residency, a program we recently launched at the USC Institute of Armenian Studies to bring leading Armenian studies scholars to USC for deeper engagement with students, faculty, staff, and the larger community. The question we unpack with Dr. Martirosyan today is a fundamental one that sometimes causes a lot of controversy in Armenian circles, and it's the following. What does it mean to say Armenian is an Indo-European language? What does it mean to say a language family? How did one come up with that title, that naming, Indo-European? And what kinds of methods and evidence do linguists use to reconstruct the history of a particular language or a language family? This conversation is part of a series of conversations Dr. Martirosyan and I have been having at the Institute for the past 8 weeks. This, of course, for the regular Language Therapy with Dr. K English language series, but we are also doing a special season of language therapy in Armenian with Dr. Martirosyan on the most pressing issues around the Armenian language. So please stay tuned for that. And please enjoy today's conversation on the position of Armenian as an Indo-European language. Although it may seem like a topic of the past, it is quite relevant for our understanding of the continuity, longevity, and vitality of Armenian across time and space. Join us. Hrach Martirosyan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Shushanjan.
I'm going to ask you my traditional opening question, which is to tell me the story of your life through your languages. Let's start with what languages or dialects were you born into?
Mm-hmm. Actually, my dialectal map is a crossroad between three tendons, one being my native Lori dialect or subdialect, so it depends on how we put this. Then on my paternal side, the roots go to Mush, Western Armenia, territory of Western Armenian dialectal regions. And my maternal side goes to Shirak, that is part of Karin or Erzurum dialect. So very different dialectal regions from each other, both geographically and also linguistically.
So you grew up in this Eastern, Western melange.
Yes, in the mixture, yeah, yes, mm-hmm. Yes.
And also, obviously, standard Eastern Armenian, because you grew up in
yes, of course.
The Soviet Socialist Republic of Armenia. What other languages besides standard Armenian and Armenian dialects did you pick up or were you exposed to along the way?
Actually, it's one of the biggest shames of my life that learning languages came to a very, very late moment of my life. So when I was 28 or 29. So we could say that this is a failure for a comparative linguist. Right? So it's a disaster. I mean, I should have started learning languages much earlier, but I didn't know that I'm going to be a linguist, and I didn't get a proper education. So everything was against this choice. Okay, but I took this challenge, and it was extremely tough to learn in environment and in the time when nothing favored this option, and so it was very, very late, and even English, German. So practically the overwhelming majority of languages which I learned or which I use in my work, I studied synchronically or diachronically by myself. Apart from some exceptions. So most of them I learned by myself and by very non-productive methods and technical means.
So you're an autodidact, one could say.
Mm-hmm.
But I assume...
Unfortunately. Because very often they say that it's an amazing thing, but it's not. Because you lose a lot of time. It's very good that if you are very independent, if you if you are a self-digger, so if you look around and if you know how to find your way, etc. But this is something else.
But I think maybe in historical comparative linguistics it's different, but it is a myth that to be a linguist one has to be a polyglot. Noam Chomsky, probably the most famous linguist, living linguist of our time, is a monoglot. He's only proficient in English. However, I do understand that for...
comparative linguistics.
Yes,
yeah.
But okay, just to clarify, I assume when you were growing up in Armenia during the Soviet Union, you knew Russian, correct? Mm-hmm. So in addition to Armenian and Russian, in adulthood, in your late 20s, you picked up English, German, Dutch?
In the school and in the university, practically nothing.
Mm-hmm. So what languages do you work in today?
Actually, there are many of them, and of course, the historical linguists do not have to be fluent synchronically in colloquial. So for this, you need environment, right? But working with them, I mean, first of all, of course, classical languages and especially ancient Greek and Indo-European languages, and again, above all, diachronic linguistics. I mean, diachronic phonology and grammar of those languages.
Define diachronic.
Diachronic is the historical form and the historical attestations of the language variety. Mm-hmm. So if we study, for example, Armenian diachronically, that this means that we are not confined to let's say, to the 5th century classical Armenian stage or Middle Armenian. Or so all these are horizontally synchronical grammars, language descriptive stages. But diachronic linguist uses all of them in the framework of periodization and also the historical development. So this is the most crucial thing about historical comparative linguistics and about diachronic study.
So studying Armenian across time.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Starting from its Indo-European roots, mm-hmm. somewhere in the 4th millennium BCE, up to the modern dialects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get to the meat of this conversation. Because you're an expert in historical comparative linguistics, I want to ask, I think, the big question that is on everyone's minds, but sometimes people are embarrassed to ask or don't know how to ask. When we say Armenian is an Indo-European language, what exactly does that mean?
This means that Armenian is cognate, that is, Armenian has the same origin as Greek, Sanskrit, German, English, Russian, Serbo-Croatian, Lithuanian, Tocharian, Phrygian. Some of them are extinct, of course, like those, like the Tocharian, Hittite, Phrygian, etc., and Celtic languages, etc., etc. So it's a big language family. Now they are totally different and mutually not intelligible. But many millennia ago, they were not yet developed as such, and they formed one mother tongue. So this is beyond any reasonable doubt as far as scientific methods can allow us to put this way. So it was one language, so one Indo-European proto-language, which later split up. So we are talking about Indo-European dispersal. Then several parts of this proto-language community, they migrated through different directions, and they end up in their historical homelands during millennia. So they changed considerably because language always changes, develops, always. So there is no single language which had some stop period in the whole span of development. So for this reason, when they split up, they went to different directions, and they didn't have any contacts, mutual contacts during this millennia, and some of them later appear again in the same environment and start to be neighbors, like Iranian, several forms of Iranian languages in different periods, and Armenian. And then there is this period of borrowings, loan words, having forgotten that we had the same language, because they don't understand each other anymore during this millennia.
It's interesting. Of the over 7,000 languages in the world today, I think less than 1% are Indo-European languages, and yet nearly half of the world's population today
huge family,
speak an Indo-European language. And all those over a dozen languages that we now group into this language family, at one point, thousands of years ago, were one.
Yes.
And then because of periodic dispersals, they split.
They got separated.
Yes. Could you maybe define how you understand a language family, and is there an analogy we could use that might make it easier for folks to understand this better?
To put it in a very simple way, this is a family tree branching out this model. Of course, it's too simple. Actually,
it's okay. That's what I'm asking for.
Because scholars also talk about waving developments, waving spread, etc. So it's there is this method of innovations, etc., etc. So it's a bit complicated to put it in a couple of sentences. But anyhow, this is a constant process of splitting up and spreading, and also giving dialectal varieties. And in some cases, they are not very strict branches, but so we can find, for example, in a group of villages, several features which we don't understand why are present in some of them, but absent from very close other villages. But to give an analogy, so we can pick up any language, any period, just about Armenian. If we are discussing the dialectal diversity of Armenian, it's the same thing. I mean, there was this moment of Proto-Armenian, and then ancient Armenian. Even then, in all the periods, there was always a certain degree of dialectal diversity. But then this grows more and more, and then during millennia, we find more dialects, more dialectal varieties than earlier. But then, and especially if you remember that historical Armenia is very mountainous region, then it is inevitable to have such a big variety. So again, from a certain point, which is not described anywhere, so in Proto-Armenian, in ancient Armenian, stages of Armenian, and then gradually we have this dialectal diversity, which goes deeper and deeper. Then we end up in 50 and 60 dialects and innumerable subdialects, etc.
So from one proto-mother language, we have descendants.
Yes, but which was also never very uniform.
Yes. Yes.
And even Indo-European was not very strictly uniform. Even in Indo-European proto-language period, we speak about dialectal diversities, and there are certain branches which are very close to Armenian, like Proto-Greek and Proto-Indo-Iranian, and at some extent also Balto-Slavic. And we can talk also about Thracian, Phrygian, etc., but not in the context of Balkan theory, for example. But so it's a bit more complicated. But most nuclear part here is the Armenian, Greek, and Indo-European dialectal union. At the period when Armenian was not yet distinct, I mean, so later after the Indo-European dispersal, they took their independent trajectories, and they developed further alone.
Before we get to that, because I want to get to siblings and cousins, I think another maybe misconception is the right word we face a lot, and we've spoken about this at length on other platforms, is this naming of the language family as Indo-European. How did that name come about, and how does that reflect the history of scholarship and the history of historical comparative linguistics? I mean, and I think some folks don't know that Indo-European isn't the only name, right? In the development of this field, it's been called Aryan, it's been called Indo-Germanic, and so on. What does it mean to call this language family Indo-European? Is it just the languages of India and Europe? Then what do we make of Tocharian and others who don't fit this geographic mapping?
Of course, this name is a very conventional one, and also it is bound with a certain degree of the development of historical linguistics. When Tocharian and many others have not been known and or even discovered.
I think
Hittite, Tocharian
yes.
were not familiar in any way.
And it's important to note that Tocharian is on the outskirts of China.
Yes, of course. So it's of course in those areas we find also some Iranian varieties, but still, this is very far from the original homeland whenever we put it. So there is a lot of debate about this, of course. Yes, of course, we look at these regions from one side, then on the other we see some Scandinavian areas or Baltic, etc., and all of them inhabited with Indo-European cultures, languages and cultures. But of course, in between, in all these Eurasian areas, we find also other language families, like Caucasian and Semitic, Semito-Kemetic, or Afrasian. Or in Africa we have Bantu. In India we have many others like Dravidian language family, for example, etc. So around these large regions, or at some point also in between these territories, we find also languages which developed from different mother tongues. But then later they had different trajectories, developments, migrations, and now we have a mixed geographical map. But when we project them during time, through time, then we end up in much narrower homeland locations, which would be later expanded to historical homelands.
Here I'm reminded, again, I think if anyone takes a basic like linguistics 101 class, undoubtedly they are taught about Sir William Jones, named as one of the founders of modern comparative linguistics. And of course, he was a philologist and lawyer in a British setting who ends up in India, not as a linguist, of course, but as a judge. In 1783, he's appointed to the Supreme Court of Judicature at Fort William, Calcutta. And his legal role requires him to adjudicate cases involving both British and Indian subjects. To do this properly, he realizes he needs to understand Hindu and Islamic law in their original languages, Sanskrit being an important one. And because of his competence in classical languages, Greek, Latin, and Persian as well, he studies Sanskrit and is stunned by the striking similarities.
Yes.
And in 1784, he founds the Asiatic Society of Bengal, a hub for scholarship on Indian languages, cultures, and history. And it's in 1786 that he makes this famous statement saying that these languages must have sprung from a common source.
Yes. This is very important. So it was in the second half of 18th century. Of course, there are other authors which discovered this, but they
the first discoverer is not always the name that remains in the record. We know that from many other examples.
1 century earlier than Sir William Jones. Van Boxhorn, who was a professor of my beloved Leiden University. He wrote something similar to this, but of course in much less precise way. And also he ascribed this proto-language Scythian root or identity, so which is, of course, not the case. And Sir William Jones was closer to the actual affairs. So apart from this, Sir William Jones does not bring any concrete linguistic material.
Yes.
But of course it doesn't matter. So he saw a lot of things, so he described in a wonderful way, and so this quotation is still very valid. And prior to these authors, we know many others, like much earlier, like Sassetti, Italian scholar, who discovered, for example, the similarity of Italian sette with Sanskrit sapta.
What date? What time period?
It's 16th century. So they both mean 7. And similarity would be even higher if he would pick up Latin, not Italian, because Latin is the mother of the Romance languages, right? Because in Latin it is septem, then pata becomes assimilated to sette, right? And Sanskrit sapta. And later they would discover many such examples, and they would discern, for example, the phonological constant relationship. So, for example, if we have in Latin or Greek or in others e or o or a, so it doesn't matter. In Sanskrit, we always have a. Yes. Then septum and sapta is very regular. So this way we come closer also to Armenian. There are some interesting comparisons also around Armenian, like Hrach Martirosyan, even.
Our beloved.
Yes, of course.
Writer, scholar.
He compared Duster, Armenian Duster, with Russian Doge, German Tochter, or Lucine, the moon word, with Luna, Lune in French, and Luna in Russian, etc. Even earlier than Hrach Martirosyan, a wonderful person, Mchitar Sebastatsi, he even mentioned that some of such similarities are not borrowings, so there's much more serious. So this is really wonderful. And an amazing comparison is which he made is that between some grammatical forms. So not not only the
Morphology.
not only the etymological nucleus, not only the root and the word itself, but the form, the basic form of the word, but also the morphological forms, like Armenian tas in Grapar in classical Armenian, which means you give or you are giving.
Second person, singular.
Present indicative. So you are giving or you give something to someone, right? So tam, tas, ta. Second person is tas. In Latin, it is das. So it's not only the etymological nucleus, the core, ta, and by the way, the and the is also regular. This relationship between these two forms. If it both would be the, then we would have a problem. But it is exactly the way we expect, because we know already the phonological laws around these sound developments. So das and tas are perfect lexical, phonological, and morphological match. So really perfect. So we have such a wonderful history of how historical linguistics came about, especially around Armenian.
But all of this to say that the name Indo-European is simply a conventional, conditional
Yes, of course,
name.
yes.
It doesn't mean that all of the languages in the Indo-European language family derived from Indian or European
dependent
languages.
From Sanskrit.
This
or
is, yes, this is very important.
By no means.
By no
yes.
means does this mean that. It could have been called something completely different, but because of the historical context,
yes.
this name is the one that stuck.
yes. It's just a pure convention because all those languages are spread throughout the wide areas of Eurasia, starting from India, but even farther we already knew. Mentioned that to Scandinavia, to other extremities of Europe, and etc. So there is no any dependence of Armenian from Sanskrit or from any European language, and there has been a lot of misuse and a lot of abuse and manipulations around this, of course, but for more than 5,000 years, Armenian was an independent branch, and so it is on its own. So this is not the case with many other branches, like Slavic languages or Germanic languages. They are a group of languages, so they became independent much later. I mean, this is, I'm not saying that this is something good or bad, or whether the independent age matters or not, but I just want to state the fact that Armenian is an independent branch throughout the whole periods following Indo-European dispersal.
But this is something very important, and if our viewers or listeners don't leave with anything else, I want them to leave with this. Does calling Armenian Indo-European in any way diminish or erase its Armenianness?
Of course not.
And it seems, after the basic explanations, the very simplified explanations we just gave, this should be obvious. But still, both of us have talked about how when we go to even academic linguistic conferences, these things come up. This is part of the wider societal discourse that somehow calling Armenian Indo-European rejects its unique Armenianness, or somehow grants all of our history, bestows all of our Armenian history to, quote, Indians and Europeans, which is absurd.
Course. Yes, we should keep in mind that Armenian, Greek, Sanskrit, Latin, and all the others are not dependent from each other. They come from the same origin, from the same mother tongue.
Yes.
In this way, we have very complex relationship between these languages. So if we talk about the oldest core of them, then it is the heritage, direct heritage all of these languages have from the proto-tongue, proto-language.
Which we conventionally call
yes, of course,
Proto-Indo-European.
yes, because we don't know how they called themselves.
Exactly.
Yes, there were no Indo-European texts from early Bronze Age, right? So we should name them somehow.
Right.
And by the way, so this was in the beginning of 19th century. Indo-European, the term Indo-European was coined by Thomas Jung, the doctor Thomas Jung. And a few years earlier and later, there has been coined also another variety of this, which is Indo-Germanic, later Indo-Germanish. So it's the same principle. And what about Indo-Germanish? So
Exactly.
So it's this theory does not give any priority to neither Sanskrit nor to Germanic languages. The only historical priority is that this sense was developed mostly from German-speaking literature. Of course, English also took a great part, and also French, Italian, and still now all these languages are very important in studying this field. But of course, so this is just the way it was coined, Indo-European and Indo-Germanic or Indo-Germanish.
And if we look at the socio-historical context, then we can see the role nationalism played, German nationalism.
Yeah, the term Aryan.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, we don't have time to go into that, but again, the way this name came up has a lot to do with the historical and socio-historical context of the major actors who we now deem as founders of this field. But in no way does it undermine
Yes, of course.
the Armenianness of Armenian.
Yes, of course, of course. And back to this dependence, or however we call it, we of course have some later stages when several languages borrow from each other, or one language from another, or sometimes we have mutual borrowings, like Armenian with Georgian, with Kurdish, with Turkish dialects, from other Caucasian languages, even from earlier stages to Semitic, etc., etc. So whenever we are talking about the Indo-European parts of this borrowed lexicon, we mention first of all Iranian, of course, and this is very interesting because Iranian, so to speak, has twofold relationship with Armenian.
Yes.
One is genetic one, related with inheritance.
So
coming from the same.
They are both Indo-European languages that stem from the same source.
Yes, as far as their cores are concerned, so they are daughter branches.
Yes.
They do not depend from each other.
Yes.
So they come from the same root. But several millennia later, after the Indo-European dispersal, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, so they now we have already the Persian Empire, and in different periods of those stages, we have very interesting and rich body of borrowings from Iranian sources. And again, this does not say anything about the core dependence. So this is just a layer of borrowings. And again, in many cases, we are dealing with mutual borrowings. And so this is the fact with practically all the languages.
So because we have such a rich source of borrowings, particularly from Middle Persian, Middle Iranian languages.
Especially Parthian.
Northwestern Armenian,
dialect.
Doesn't mean that Armenian comes from Iranian.
Of course,
That's the
not.
point you're making here.
Yes, because somewhere in the during 18th century, the Indo-Europeans thought that Armenian was an Iranian branch, belonged to Iranian branch of Indo-European language family. But of course, practically everyone who is somehow concerned in the field of philology know that we should mention here the
Hübschmann set the record straight.
1875 paper about the place of Armenian. in Indo-European language family, and where he demonstrated in strict scientific methods that Armenian has two components. And the basic one, the nuclear one, comes through inheritance from Indo-European. But all this Iranianness which comes to our eyes when we look upon the vocabulary, so this is the layer of borrowings. So this is something.
It's a much more superficial.
Yes, and also which is much more recent, and it doesn't say anything about the original state of Armenian.
Talking about scientific method. So here you are as a linguist, following suit of generations of linguists, making claims like Armenian is an Indo-European language. How do we know? What types of methods and evidence do linguists rely on to classify languages? Could you maybe simplify it for a non-linguist and talk us through that process? How do we know if languages are related? How do we know if they're part of the same language family? What methods do you use?
The easiest way to discern this is to pick up any items of core vocabulary.
What does core mean?
That is not a technical borrowing or any recent item or
just family.
Kinship term, numeral, celestial body name, or any simple actions like walking or eating or etc. etc. So a lot of basic stuff. Okay. So this is the nucleus of any language, right? So basic vocabulary. Then let's pick up the word for daughter, and then we study in all these languages how does this word look like, and then we see in Sanskrit duhitar, in Greek thugater, in Persian, dokhtar, in Celtic languages the same way, dukhtir or something, in Celtic languages. Then tuvatrai in Anatolian languages, Hittite, and some relics also in, Luvian, but some relics also in Hittite. And then Doch and Docher, this oblique stem is discerned and coming to closer comparison with Dochter, etc. Right? So if Doch, we see only one syllable, but the continuance is also visible, and this is again perfect. And Armenian duster, etc., etc. It cannot be any coincidence. Yes, it's not possible.
But I guess the point I want to make is in all these languages, this word means daughter. So semantically,
yes, so we have two plans of comparison.
Yes. Semantically, they mean the same thing and they look the same.
Yes, form and content. So these two plans must be preserved always. So the form and the meaning, of course. And then we also should talk about the context, because if we find something which has similarity with a language in Japan or in Australia, so anything should be explored carefully, of course, through scientific methods. But I mean, if you don't find these similarities systematically, if you do not explore the relationship between their corresponding phonemes, and you do not explore in all other cases when these phonemes are in the similar environment between this vowel or between this resonant, etc., etc. If this is not systematic, then we don't have any scientific method, and so 3 or more plans, but we keep short, of course. The form or the shape, the meaning or content, and then the context. So if we have more such comparisons, one example is enough for this daughter, of course, to make it clear that this is very serious. But of course, this is one of the more than 1,000 roots which have such reliable comparanda. So this means that we have also this environment of this theory. And then we know that we are not talking any accidental similarity, but also we study phonological and morphological similarities between them, relations between all these forms, and then we come to the science.
I know we don't have a lot of time or capacity in one episode to talk about all of the historical aspects of Armenian, but this is a question I'm constantly assaulted with. And I use that word very intentionally, assaulted. So very briefly, can we talk about Armenians' place in the Indo-European family? And you mentioned this earlier, but I'd like to do it explicitly. First of all, how old is Armenian?
5 or 6,000. So it is. We can say that Indo-European split took place somewhere in the mid-4th millennium BCE. Within this language form, we are talking about dialectal closeness of Armenian with Greek and Indo-Iranian.
So that was going to be my next question, which you anticipated, which is, does Armenian have siblings or so?
Yes,
because
yes,
we
those
always
are
talk
the
about
siblings.
Armenian as a solo branch, right? Right now, if you look at any visual characterization of the Indo-European family, Armenian has its own branch. But did Armenian split on its own, or did it split with a couple of siblings or cousins and then go on its own
As far as
path?
we see from the facts and from whatever survived, so we cannot. We can of course imagine some other situations or very close relationship between Armenian and some branches which did not survive. So we cannot talk about them because they're not there, right? They may have been existed, but so now we are dealing with the fact that Armenian is a branch on its own. And of course, when we talked about dialectal diversity of Indo-European and closeness of Armenian, pre-Armenian, not Proto-Armenian, but pre-Armenian, that is the original dialectal state of Armenian within Indo-European language family before dispersal. So at this stage, we are talking about the dialectal affinities of Armenian with Proto-Greek, with Proto-Indo-Iranian, and Proto-Balto-Slavic at some extent,
So
etc.
before they split.
Before the split, before the dispersal, yes. And after this moment, of course, this wasn't the moment, so we, not in this strict way. But after this stage, we already have the independent history of Armenian, starting from mid-4th millennium somewhere. And so this means that Armenian is 5,500 years old.
How can the study of Armenian contribute or inform the study of Indo-European languages?
In innumerable ways and examples it can be shown. So if we have more than 1,000 roots in Armenian which descend from Indo-European, this means that Armenian contributes 1,000 times to Indo-European, to the study of Indo-European vocabulary. Because with or without Armenian, there is a slight change of, for example, the status of the word or about the spread. For instance, a certain root can be attested, for example, in Baltic and Slavic languages, and that's it. But then all of a sudden we find an Armenian cognate, and phonologically we can demonstrate that it is cognate, so not an early borrowing or something. And what do we have in that case? So without Armenian, this Balto-Slavic would be possibly a local and not very early word, nothing having with the Indo-European family, but Armenian comes to change this idea. And we can bring many such examples because Armenian was one of the basic descendants and an independent branch of this language family. This means that Armenian contributes in every way, syntactically, morphologically, word formatively, grammatically, and phonologically, etc. So, what about the culture? Let's not start talking about culture, because linguistics is the only systematical tool for studying all the notions around the everyday life, different branches of culture, etc., etc. So if there is a certain notion, then there is also
a
its
name
and many names in many cases, old, recent, borrowed, native, etc. And the whole body of this evidence contributes to elucidation of cultural past, which is otherwise practically
silent.
Silent and dark.
So I guess maybe it's fair to say that from both the Armenian perspective and the Indo-European perspective, it's mutually enriching and mutually illuminating. So positioning Armenian within an Indo-European context enriches our understanding of Armenian that we wouldn't have with just an internal study. And Armenian fills in the gaps and fills out the puzzle of the larger Indo-European story.
And in many, many issues, it is indispensable.
Yeah. Okay, as we wrap up, because I think we could sit in the studio for 10 hours and still have more examples to give, what are some exciting new directions in historical comparative linguistics? Like, what I want to imagine is when Hrach Martirosyan goes to bed. What questions about the history of the Armenian language, like, keep you up at night?
This is
how much time do we have?
No, let's keep it short, because otherwise it would go without any end. So I just mentioned, for example, lingo-cultural field of this studies. So this is an ocean, because in every aspect of the life and culture of language community is again elucidated by linguistic means, and so every time I have different issues, different items, and all of them are very intriguing, and so there is no end to. I mean, one thing is very annoying or making me furious is that Armenian has thousands roots which have no etymology. There are many such words on which we can discuss certain alternative solutions, but there are many of them on which we don't have any clue, and this makes me very furious and very intrigued, right? So it's very excited, because it is certain that they must have some origin, and it is either the limit of our knowledge or limit of preserved facts and data, but many things become clear and clear during the investigations, and this process is really marvelous, and so every day you can find out a new thing, but of course you should be patient, not to hurry with conclusions. And there are etymology which I am digesting already for 35 or 40 years. And Akavak is one of them, of course, but hundreds of such words. So it's marvelous to be in this process, and it doesn't have any end.
Amazing.
Any discernible edge.
Okay. If someone is listening or watching this conversation, it's a young person, maybe in their undergrad years or starting graduate school, and they're interested in pursuing your field, which is historical comparative linguistics, or the wider, I guess, maybe, discipline of linguistics, what advice would you give them?
Many advices or consultations could be mentioned here, but the most important would be, I think, do not enter into this field unless your eyes sparkle when dealing with this stuff. And another would be don't love the professors whose eyes do not sparkle when teaching you.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. I couldn't agree more. You need to be inspired by what you're doing and be with people and study with people who
Of
are
course, yeah.
inspired by what they do. Oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to steal that from you.
My pleasure.
Okay, if magically you could go back in time, or if you had the time, somehow you're on sabbatical and have no other responsibilities, and you could pick up a language from history, extinct or still spoken.
So using time machine?
Yes. Which would it be? What language would you learn, and why?
If I could travel to a period from some 20,000 years ago, this period, and to listen to the Nostratic language speakers.
What does that mean?
So the
Nostratic.
Nostratic language is actually there are different varieties, different forms of Nostratic theories, but to put it in a simple way, with this limiting ourselves to this basic Nostratic term, this is grand or whatever grandmother language of Indo-European, because all the languages must have come from one or maybe a couple. Also there are debates about this, but still, so our Indo-European did not drop from the moon or from the universe, and all the languages evolve always. They always change, they develop, and Indo-European is just one stage. And prior to that, if we go deeper through time, several millennia or tens of millennia, then we end up in Nostratic union, and then so it would be marvelous to to find out how it sounded, this proto language. It would be marvelous to learn ancient Egyptian, for example, because I loved the mythology and culture of ancient Egypt when I was schoolboy. Phrygian, for example, or Tocharian, especially in the living form, not by the help of this very limited texts, especially in the case of Thracian or Phrygian or some others. Or what else? A lot of things. So it's very difficult, but also it would be wonderful to be in an environment where I could be in contact with the hunters of Artsakhan's unique dialectal speakers in 1,000 years ago, for example.
Wow.
Like so, because they had several different ways of pronouncing. For example, not arch, but orch, for example, or not Gael, but Goel, and there must be also some other features. And we have only some sporadic and very seldom recordings of this thing. But also women language, for example. So this then you would go there and you would inform me, because I wouldn't be in that environment, right? How the women spoke
when the men are not around.
Yes, of course. So this is already a wonderful sociolinguistic field, and so it would be amazing to have such opportunities and many such.
Too many wonderfuls.
Yes.
Okay, as a closing question, why does the work that you do and that other linguists do matter? Why should non-specialists, heritage speakers, community members, students care?
Another tough question, but so this is very trivial. So how can we be not interested in our identity and the language and the roots, of course. So and language is our everything. So it's our basis. We can talk about cultural or anthropological components of our Armenianness, but the most important and unchanged feature is the language, which comes with unbroken continuity from Indo-European roots until now. And so we should learn our roots, and also we should keep in mind that the whole span of our development of our not only language but also culture is based on language studies. And also when it comes to the more modern periods, when we have to systematize, for example, the modern language, when we should understand how does this work, I mean, why do we have these differences, is it normal or not, then if we don't know that this is more than normal to have these 5,000 or 6,000 years developments, then we should probably misuse our limited perception about how to deal linguistic issues, right? So when making this or that decisions about the how to make rules in modern language, then we should know the logic, how the language develops. And then we should know, of course, that we don't have any linguistic form having fallen from the sky. And so we have always interchange of these stages, and we should study all our previous stages, and then basing on this knowledge, we should look through towards future. And also we should not forget that language is not only by the means of communication, but also collected and compiling our treasures, cultural treasures. And without language, this nothing can be known and also studied. So language is our everything. So identity, cultural treasures, communication, everything.
I mean, this could be the greatest ad for my podcast. But I guess the big takeaway for me in engaging with your work and engaging with you are the following. One, language is the perennial witness to our experience.
Yes, of course.
And two,
it was always there.
It was always there.
With the time of our joy and
yes,
disasters and tragedies.
You said unbroken chain. That's very important.
Because the cultural issues can be borrowed, they can be forgotten, or they can be replaced, renovated, or whatever. But linguistic continuity is without any
constant
break. Yes.
And you need to understand the past to craft the future.
Yes, and the logic of the language development, as I try to put. Yes.
Hrach Martirosyan, thank you so much for everything you do and for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you also, Shushan Karapetyan Jan.